Dear students, now we are going to discuss a cohesion tension theory concerned with a long distance transport of water, particularly, and along with the water, the movement of inorganic and some extent organic nutrients. So still we are within ascent of sap. What is ascent of sap? Upward movement of water, minerals from root to shoot apex against a gravitational force is ascent of sap. So now, what about a cohesion tension theory in the support of a transpiration pull, pulling force that accounts for movement of water up to long distance. So second theory is cohesion tension theory. Okay, so proposed by Dixon. So according to this theory, what are the factors which are able to pull water up to 100 meters? One, cohesive forces. Cohesive forces of water molecules. Second one, adhesive forces, attractive forces between water molecules and walls of lignified walls of xylem vessels, tracheids, tracheary elements. Third one, surface tension. Surface tension is nothing but a cohesive forces of water molecules is more if it is in liquid phase when compared with a vapor phase. And these three are able to ensure a tensile strength of water column. What is a tensile strength? Ability to resist a pulling force. Because of pulling, definitely it leads to discontinuity in the water column. But such a thing is not possible, rarely possible because of a tensile strength. So what is a tensile strength? Ability to resist a pulling force. And a fourth one, capillarity, the transportation of water through the thin tubes or conduits, thin tubular extensions, tracheids and vessels with a narrow diameter, small diameter only, capillarity. And the last one is a transpiration pull. So what is a transpiration pull? How? Transpiration pull is responsible for pulling of water. Transpiration pull. So we have to understand that one with the help of one diagram. So this is a soil surface. And this is a root system. Taproot system. And take certain number of root hairs. So for example, here I'm taking root hair, enlarged one, root hair, large one. That is actually small one only. This is the root hair. Okay, right? So initially in the soil, actually soil is with the highest water potential. So soil water, for example, only psi W value, for example, here I'm taking 0 or take very less negative value. You can take 0 also, but better to take minus 0.1. So soil water with the highest water potential. So this one is with a high water potential, high psi W value. Okay, right? So now take a xylem part, xylem of the root. For example, this is a xylem of the root. And in between root hair and xylem, a number of cells are there. Epidermal cells, cortical cells, endodermis, pericycle, and finally xylem. And this one is a aerial shoot system, stem part. Is a stem part. And take one leaf here. So this one is a leaf, petiole part, and leaf lamina. Okay, so this one is a xylem of a stem, and that xylem of stem into leaf also, right? So atmosphere. What are the conditions of atmosphere here? High temperature. So atmosphere is with a more temperature, high temperature, high. Next, water vapor. Water vapor or humidity, very less. So external environment is not saturated with a required quantity of water or water vapor. So high temperature. For example, here, okay, right, come back. So because of high temperature, and here that air is with a less amount of water vapor. So here in the guard cells, for example, here guard cells are present. So this is guard cell, aperture. Okay. So because of a high temperature, what about the loss of water into the environment? Okay. So loss of water into the intercell into the aperture of guard cell. So transpiration, loss of water from the aerial parts. Here I'm taking stomata, guard cells. Okay, so after transpiration is going on, now guard cell psi W value is, for example, only minus 0.9, more negative value. Next cell, around this one, subsidiary cells are present. Subsidiary cells are accessory cells. Under the anatomy, you studied this one already. So now take subsidiary cell. What about the psi W value of subsidiary cell? So this is psi W value of guard cell, right here, guard cell. And psi W value of next cell is minus 0.8, for example only. So this one is a subsidiary cell. So water potential gradient is established between these two, minus 0.9, minus 0.8. Now, what about the movement of water from subsidiary cell to guard cell? Now, what about next cell? Mesophyll cell. For example, here mesophyll cell. This one is dummy diagram only. Mesophyll cell. Psi W value of mesophyll cell is minus 0.7, for example only. That is either palisade parenchyma or spongy parenchyma, mesophyll. Now, what about the direction of movement of water from minus 0.7 to minus 0.8? Okay, next. Bundle sheath, directly I'm going to vessel. This is a vessel of a xylem vessel or trachea vessel. So in the xylem vessel, take here xylem vessel. For example, in minus 0.6. So that is about a xylem. So gradually, water potential gradient is established between or among all these cells or not. Before transpiration, for example, all are at equilibrium. There is no movement of water, net movement of water. Once transpiration is initiated, what about psi W or water potential gradient is established or not? So between these two, 0. minus 0.1 or 0.1 numerically and negative value difference. Some difference is present. That is called as a psi delta. Psi delta is established. So gradually, negative pressure. What is that a negative pressure? A negative hydrostatic pressure is created within the xylem vessel. So that negative tension, what is that negative tension? Simply water potential gradient, pulling force. Negative tension means negative hydrostatic pressure, negative hydrostatic pressure. That is because of pulling only. So that negative hydrostatic pressure is extended up to xylem vessel of the leaf. For example, now the xylem vessel is with minus 0.6. Okay, so that negative tension is called as a pull. Pull is nothing but negative tensions, negative hydrostatic pressure created within the xylem vessel. Next, that will be continued. So this is a xylem vessel of a stem. For example, here, for example only here, psi W value of a xylem vessel in the stem. Here it is a psi W value is, for example, only minus 0.5, for example. So now what about the direction of movement of water from minus 0.5 to minus 0.6? Next, here, what about psi W value of this one minus 0.4, for example? Next, some other cells that may be cortex or endodermis or whatever it is. You reduce it simply. Okay, so here psi W value of cortex, here I'm taking cortex. Psi W value is minus 0.3, for example. Okay, and what about a root hair? Root hair psi W value is minus 0.2. So if all these cells are arranged one after another in a sequence, definitely, what about psi W values starting from soil onwards? Start from soil onwards. Soil with a psi W value. So soil with a, what about a psi W value? Minus 0.1. Next cell, root hair, for example. Root hair, minus 0.2, root hair. Next, cortex. For example, only minus 0.3 cortex. Next, root xylem, minus 0.4. Next, root xylem vessel. Next, stem xylem, stem xylem, with a minus 0.5. Next, here, leaf xylem, minus 0. How much? 6, and continue it. Okay, so now according to this water potential values, what about the direction of movement of water from soil to root, root to cortex, root air, from there to this one, this one, this one. Next values and continue it. What are the cells? Minus 0.7, minus 0.8, next minus 0.9. So from minus 0.6 to 7, 8, 9, finally into atmosphere. For example, atmosphere is with a minus 0.20, for example. Only. So here, who is able to create this tension? That is a transpiration only. So according to Dixon, because of transpiration, water potential gradient is extended from leaf to stem, stem to root, and finally root is able to absorb water from the soil. Okay, so transpiration pull is able to create a water potential gradient. Okay, so gradually, what about the negative value from here onwards? More negative, highest negative. Okay, next second highest, third highest negative, and so on. So soil water with the least negative psi W value means highest water potential. So from root to shoot, what about the negative value? Here I'm taking from root to or soil to root to shoot. What about the negative value? Psi W negative value is increasing. So increasing means psi W value decreases. Psi W value decreases. Okay, right? 1 minute, hang on. If all these cells are arranged end to end in a row from soil to leaf. For example, this is a complete inside the plant. A number of cells are there, whatever the type of cell. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. It's a dummy one only, not the real one. Okay, right? So this one is, for example, leaf cell, whatever the type of cell. Here I'm taking guard cell, for example. This one is a guard cell. Here, minus 0.9. Next, minus 0.8, minus 0.7, minus 0.6, minus 0.5, minus 0.4, minus 0.3. This one minus 0.2, minus 0.1, minus 0.001, for example. Okay, so between any two cells, gradient is present. So here from base to apex, this is a proximal part, basal part, proximal part, basal part. And this one is a distal part of that plant body, distal end, apex. So from here to here, what about a psi W negative value? Increasing or not? Definitely. Okay, psi W negative value increasing. So from here to there, what about a psi W value? Psi W value decreasing or not? So negative value increasing. What about a psi W value from there? Decreasing or not? Right here, decreasing. This is a decreasing order. Decreasing order. Okay, so from here to here, what about the psi W negative value? Declining. And what about the psi W value from apex to base? Means water potential, psi W value. Increasing or not? Increasing. Okay, so transpiration pull is a passive process. It is not an active process. So transportation of water up to 100 or 120 meters by means of transpiration pull is passive transport only, and it is a pulling force. Okay, so this is a continuity of water column. For example, this is a continuity of water column. This red colored one is a continuity of water column, continuous up to 100 feet or meters, whatever it is. Right? So up to here, only transpiration is able to transpiration pull is able to transport, but not a root pressure. Root pressure accounts for transportation of water up to between cells up to 1 feet or 2 feet only. That is insufficient. So according to Dixon and most of the scientists, well accepted theory is cohesion tension theory, that is based on transpiration pull. Along with the transpiration pull, what are the other factors required? Water consent factors, cohesive forces. What are the cohesive forces? Attractive forces between or among same type of molecules. Definitely one water molecule is associated or attached with the other water molecule. That is called as cohesive force. So because of cohesive forces, and second one, adhesive forces. What is adhesion? Adhesive factors. Adhesion means attachment or attractive forces between two dissimilar structures or compounds or whatever it is. So here adhesion is in between water molecules and lignified tracheids and vessels. Third one, tensile strength, ability to resist continuity of water column, which is often broken by enormous tensions created by transpiration pull on the continuity of water column. And capillarity, transpiration pull. Okay, so that is about cohesion tension theory. Now, what are the objections against transpiration pull theory or cohesion tension theory? What are the objections? So what are the Objections, questions raised by other scientists. Objections. Against Dickson concept. Means simply what are the questions and how Dickson answered all these questions. First one, this is a little bit beyond NCERT. That is embolism. 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 What is this embolism? For example, this is a xylem vessel. Here I'm taking xylem vessel. This is a xylem vessel 1. Xylem vessel 1. Or you may take a tracheids, but you take a vessel. And this one more xylem vessel. One more xylem vessel within the stem. Or you may take root also. Okay, so this is a continuity of water column. So water is going up. Going up. For example, all of a sudden, bubbles are formed. This is bubble. Bubble, a number of bubbles. Air bubbles. Air bubbles. Air bubbles. Small bubbles. Okay, so if all these bubbles are united, that leads to what? Formation of a big bubble. Big bubble. So that leads to what? Air bubbles leads to what? Cavitation. Cavitation. What is cavity? Large bubble formed or not? Initially, small bubbles. If all these bubbles are merged, definitely it leads to what? Formation of a large bubble. That is called as cavitation. What is cavitation? Cavitation means simply formation of large bubble or cavity. Okay, so now what about a water column? Water column is disturbed or not? So because of cavitation, cavitation leads to what? Discontinuity. Discontinuity in the water column. So water column is disturbed. So that a discontinuity in the water column or because of cavitation is called as a embolism. So embolism is a discontinuity of water column because of cavitation. Now, what about answer by Dickson? Answer against this question. Answer of Dickson was, for example, this is a obstruction. This is obstruction or not? There is no continuity. So simply, what about the answer given by Dickson? Bypass. So water is able to take bypass. For example, road is under construction. Take diversion. Like that. So answer was taking diversion. Bypass. Taking diversion. Bypass. Bypass. Okay. So this was satisfactorily answered. Acceptable. Reason, a number of xylem vessels are there. Second question. According to Dickson statement, tracheids. They questioned out of tracheids and vessels, which one is more efficient? Okay, so tracheids are more efficient than vessels. Reason, tracheids are able to provide more stability to continuity of water column. What is trachea? For example, this is a trachea. Spindle shaped one, trachea. End walls are solid walls. Solid walls. No pores. That is able to provide more stability to water column. End walls are able to provide more stability to water column. Here, such a thing is not possible. Reason, here pores are present. Go back to anatomy. Perforation plates are present. So what about in the case of trachea? End walls are solid walls. The solid walls are able to provide more support to continuity of water column. But according to evolution, this statement was wrong. Reason, what is that explanation? According to evolution, vessels are more advanced, evolved later, and more efficient. In conduction. So Dixon failed to explain this statement. That was a wrong statement given by Dixon. So that is about cohesion tension theory. And that mainly depends on transpiration pull. In addition to that one, cohesive forces, adhesive forces, surface tension, and that ensure tensile strength and capillarity also. Capillarity means transportation of water through the thin tubes. So all these factors responsible for upward movement of water. So here the given heading was a water movement up a plant. That is nothing but a ascent of sap, ascending. So what is ascent of sap? Sap is nothing but a solution present within the xylem. What is that solution? Water, inorganic nutrients, some amount of organic nitrogen and other organic materials. So transportation of water from root to shoot against gravitational force, that is a translocation, is called as a ascent of sap present in the xylem sap. Okay.